have the opportunity to dive into your word, to look at David and how he served you, and sometimes how he didn't. We pray that we will take his life and the lessons we can learn from it, and find ways to apply to our lives, and how to be strong in adversity, and how we can best follow you with our whole hearts. Thank you, God, for all of our many blessings.
Amen. All right, we're in chapter 27. What? Did I say we're going to start chapter 26? Oh, David spared Saul the second time. We'd already covered that. And then I went backwards. And now go forwards. Yeah, chapter 26 is where David spares Saul the second time. He's done that a couple of times there. And Raymond thinks I'm a little popular. He waved his hand at me. Turn my microphone on. In chapter 27, what's David do?
He kills a bunch of people.
He kills a bunch of people. Yeah, he does. Rather ruthlessly, it sounds like, too, huh? All right? So it starts off with David saying in his heart, "Now I shall perish someday by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than I should speedily escape the land of the Philistines, and Saul will despair of me to seek me anymore in any part of Israel. So I shall escape out of his hand." And this is after he had spared Saul's life a second time, and after Saul basically had this moment of remorse and left off his pursuit of David and went home. Okay? Yet David realizes that this is only a temporary situation. He says, Saul's going to hunt me down until he kills me. And so he chooses to flee to the land of Philistia. Why? Why in the world would he go to Philistia? Okay, he figures Saul won't follow him there. Saul is pretty afraid of the Philistines. We're going to see that in the next chapter. And it's going to drive him to do something drastic. Okay? And so, but Saul's only killed his hundreds. Who's killed his thousands? And he's killed 1,000 who? Philistine. And so he thinks he's going to have a welcome in Philistia? How's that going to work out, right? In fact, he had tried that once before. Remember, he went to Gath, and you got this picture of him kind of scrabbling on the door, and the princes of Philistia kind of rat him out and said, "Hey, this is the king of Israel." They even recognized him at that time as the king. They knew that God was going to make him king. And they said, "Is this not the one that they sing songs about, saying Saul has killed his hundreds and David his thousands?" And so when David figures out, uh-oh, he starts feigning madness, right? And Achish, the king, is like, what are you bringing this madman to me here? You know, get at it. So David escapes. Okay? Well, now he goes back to Philistia. And he goes right back to Gath. And he goes back to Achish. And we have no idea how many years later this is. Saul reigned for 40 years. It seems like it was fairly early in Saul's reign when Samuel anointed David, because it didn't take Saul very long to start ignoring God. But we have no real time markers here. So David's been on the run, for quite a while, and he goes back to Gath, and he goes to escape Saul, because he figures Saul isn't going to follow me there. He'll despair of catching me. Okay? But what does he do while he's there? He kills a bunch of people. They were talking before class, right? He kills a bunch of people. But he goes raiding, doesn't he? He goes raiding, and what does he do through those raids? What does he do for himself? he gets rich. He provides for all those who are following him and all their households. And he's going to use some of that money in a little bit here. Take a look at chapter 30, verses 26 through 31. In chapter 30, verse 26, it says, "Now when David came to Ziklag, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, to his friends, saying, 'Here is a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. To those who are in Bethel, those who are in Ramoth of the south, those who are in Jitter, those who are in Eror, those who are in Sifmoth, and those who are in Esthemiah, those who are in Raphel, those who are in the cities of the Jaharmeelites,'" that's going to be important here in a minute, "those who are in the cities of the Kenites, those who are in Hormah, those who are in Horizon, those who are in Aktak," man, I hate pronouncing these, "those who are in Hebron, and to all the places where David himself and his men were accustomed to rove." Okay? When he was wandering around in the wilderness of Judea, these are the places he was, wandering around in. So here, he's in Philistia, and he's done pretty good for himself. And so now he sends some of this spoil, after he has destroyed the Amalekites that raided Ziklag, okay? He sends him to these elders. Anybody have an idea why he might have done that?
Ingratiate them and perhaps ask a favor after it's done.
Okay. These might be bribes, okay? He's going to be the next king. And he definitely wants the support of the people if he's going to be the next king. He may have done this because some of these people may have supported him when he was fleeing from Saul. Of course, we know there were a lot of people in Judah that betrayed him to Saul or tried to betray him to Saul, right? But this is a very political move. Yeah, could be. It doesn't tell us, okay? But he spreads some of the wealth around here, okay? What other advantages might there have been to him being in Philistia? By the way, how long does he spend in Philistia?
16 months.
A year and 4 months, okay? And that seems to be kind of like the longest time he's been in one place from what we read about is being pursued by Saul. So a year and 4 months, that's a good amount of time. Okay, so Achish had given him Ziklag, and there he is, and he's kind of camped out. Time for him to actually make a home for themselves. And what advantages might have accrued to him as a result of living among the Philistines, besides wealth?
Learn their strongholds, learn their weaknesses, or whatever.
He can study the enemy, right? He can learn their military tactics. One thing that people suggest that he was able to learn was the use of iron and making iron implements. See, it's not just David we're talking about, it's all the men that are with him. He's got 600 men and their families with him as well. So for 16 months, a year and 4 months, they're there with the Philistines. And they could very easily have picked up how to work this iron. Because before that, the Philistines had iron implements of war. The Israelites did not. In fact, it says earlier that the only ones who had swords were Saul and Jonathan. Okay? And so David has the opportunity to learn here while he's there. And then the raids. He has the ability to eliminate some of Israel's enemies. Okay? I've got a map here. I had a map here. Raymond has got a map here. There it is, right there. Okay? Okay. Achish, he had been with Achish for a while, made quite an impression upon Achish. And David goes to him and says, it's not right for me to sit here and sponge off you. Give me my own place. So Achish gives him Ziklag. There we go. And it could be around here or here. Nobody's exactly sure where Ziklag was. But it's in the south. It's towards the south of Judah. Jerusalem is up above the top of the map there a little bit. You can see where Gath is up here. This is where he fled to. This is where Achish is at. And so Achish gives him Ziklag. And the scriptures say Ziklag belonged to the king of Judah to this day. Okay, when it was written. And so there he is. He's quite a bit separated from Achish. He's quite a bit south of Gath. And it says that he raids. Okay? Take a look, if you will. Let me get back here to chapter 27. In verse 8, it says, And David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. Who are the Amalekites? They're the first ones that attacked Israel when they came up out of Egypt. And that's why God told Saul to completely destroy them. And of course, Saul did completely destroy them. So David goes down and he starts raiding the Amalekites as well. Okay? So it says, For those nations were the inhabitants of the land from of old, as you go to Shur, even as far as the land of Egypt. So this is down into the deep south. So what was David's tactic when he would go raid these places? What would he do?
Kill all men and women, take care of everything.
He'd kill everything, right? And why would he kill men, women, and children? No witnesses, okay? No witnesses to tell Achish what he's been doing. Okay? What's David tell Achish? Yeah, I've been raiding in Judah. Okay? In fact, David is harassing these people, and all the way down here, the Amalekites. But he says that he has been raiding along among the Jerahmeelites and the Kenites over here in the southern part of Judah. So how does Achish feel about that? He says, oh, this is great. He says, his people will abhor him, and he'll be loyal to me forever. Okay? So this is David's tactic. Sounds kind of ruthless, doesn't it? I can't read this chapter without thinking that this is kind of a low spot in David's character. Okay? Don't know. He never seems to be condemned for it. Okay?
It strikes me that he brought his two wives, being Abigail one of them, and she's so wise that he still did this.
Mm-hmm.
He did. Where was she?
Yeah. Well, David may be thinking, hey, I'm providing for my people. I'm attacking the enemies of the Lord, right? I'm deceiving one of the enemies of the Lord, Achish. So I'm pretty sure that it was fairly easy for him to justify his actions here. I guess what sounds so difficult is the deception, the lying, and the killing of just everybody. So he's not discovered. But then again, when God told Israel to go into the promised land, who were they to kill? Everybody. Man, woman, and child. One of the great socio-political debates as far as warfare in the Middle East, if you don't kill the kids, you're just raising another generation that are going to be terrorists. Or you're going to raise another generation that are going to grow up with this incredible resentment towards whoever it was that attacked them. And that's been going on for a few generations now. God said, just destroy them all. Okay? Now, on one hand, I can understand that. The kids, they're all better off, right? Because if they're not the age of accountability, they haven't sinned, straight to heaven. The adults, not so much, okay? But these are the enemies of the Lord, and these are the enemies of his people. And, God is going to judge them. God is going to determine, what's right and what's wrong in that situation. But for you and me, I think of just that incredible brutality. Kind of hard to wrap my mind around sometimes. So, Achish, why, the first time everybody's leery of David, he feigns madness, they send him away. Now Achish is going to accept him. Okay? And he accepts him before all the raiding starts. Why? Why would Achish accept him? By the way, Achish may be a royal name. It may just be the title for the king. Okay? Just like Pharaoh was the title for the king of Egypt. Okay? So Achish here accepts him. Why would he accept him?
I'm not sure that Achish is necessarily very smart if he's not able to piece together. Every night that David goes raiding, one of my places gets hit. Put those together. I'm not sure that he's smartest on the block, but that could be. I mean, like you said, it could be far enough apart that
he may not be hearing about it.
I've been there long enough to make an impact necessarily.
Yeah.
When he came in the first time.
Yeah, they may be separated far enough. And in fact, the Girzites, the Geshurites, and the Amalekites may not really have anything to do with the Philistines, okay? But they are enemies of God's people. So David says, I'm down here and I'm doing this, but he's telling Achish, no, I've been raiding in Judah, okay? And so that's making Achish pretty happy here because Judah is his enemy. But I want you to think about this, okay? Do the Philistines know of David's persecution by Saul? It's pretty common knowledge. It's been going on for years. So they see him as fleeing from Saul. They see him as being a refugee from a government that is hostile towards him. They see him as being a refugee from a people that are hostile towards him. And so he has fled to them for safety, right? He's a political exile. And in these days, the political exiles often became mercenaries, working for other kingdoms. At the Battle of Marathon, there were some Greeks that sided with Persia in the Battle of Marathon. Pay me enough money, I'll fight against my own people. We call them traitors today, right? But political exiles, they do this all the time. Remember Jephthah, one of the judges? This is exactly what he did. They threw him out because he was the son, the illegitimate son, I guess, of a concubine or of a harlot. And so they ran him out of town until he became a mercenary. There were men that were attracted to him. He became very adept at warfare. And then when they got in trouble, they wanted to bring him back. Okay? And so David may have been playing the part of a mercenary. And we're going to see that in chapter 29, where that seems to be the case. So he's there for a year and 4 months. Verse 7 tells us that. And Achish has given him Ziklag as his base of operations. And his MO, I'm going to attack these people. Tell Achish I'm attacking these people. And so Achish, in verse 12, believed David, saying he has made his people Israel utterly abhor him. Therefore, he will be my servant forever. Okay? And this is quite a coup for the Philistines, because David is definitely a man of war, and he's a very accomplished man of war. And so to have someone like that fighting on your side, Achish is feeling pretty good about that. Okay? He says his people abhor him now. Of course, David's been deceiving him. All right? So here's David. And David's story is going to pick up again in chapter 29. But before we get there, of course, we've got chapter 28. Who's chapter 28 about? It's about Saul, right? So we've got the writer, and he's talking about David, right? Maybe some questionable behavior here. And he starts talking about Saul. Definitely questionable behavior here, okay? It's talking about the conflict between the Philistines and Judah, still going on, and Saul is terrified. In verse 1 of chapter 28, it says, "It happened in those days, the Philistines gathered their armies together for war to fight with Israel. And Achish said to David, 'You assuredly know that you will go out with me to battle, you and your men.' And David said to Achish, 'Surely you know what your servant can do.' And Achish said to David, 'Therefore I will make you one of my chief guardians forever.'" So now what's the relationship between David and Achish? What has Achish just done?
Made him his servant.
Well, he's made him his bodyguard, basically. David and his men now are the royal troops, if you will, okay? They're his personal bodyguard. And David here is basically saying, yeah, let's go to war against Israel. And chapter 29 is going to go into that in much more detail. But before that, we look at verse 3. It says, "Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah in his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the spiritists out of the land." Well, that was a good thing, because that's what God said he was supposed to do. "Then the Philistines gathered together and came and encamped at Shunem. So Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped at Gilboa. And when Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly." So Saul here is terrified. He sees this army. He's thinking, we're doomed. So what's he immediately try to do?
He calls up a meeting.
Inquire of the Lord. He immediately says, oh, God's got to tell me, Samuel's dead. Okay, remember this paragraph started off with Samuel's dead. He's buried, he's gone. Okay? Saul now is terrified. He wants to know how things are going to go. So he wants to inquire of the Lord. And it says, so Saul inquired of the Lord in verse 6, and the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. Whether it's casting lots, whether it's sending a prophet to him, or whether it's giving him a dream or a vision, stone cold silence. Okay, God's left him. God, Samuel is going to reveal to him, has become his enemy. Right? So, what's he do? He has no counsel. He has no guidance. He has no idea what to do. He's terrified. Yeah, he says, can somebody find me a witch? Right? Can somebody find me a medium or spiritist? What is a medium?
Somebody supposed to be able that's dead back.
Yeah, somebody who's supposed to be able to raise spirits from the dead. Okay? In fact, when Saul goes to the witch at Endor, right, he says, I want you to hold a seance for me. Okay? Because I want to talk to this spirit. So, here he is. It says in verse 7, Saul said to his servants, find me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, in fact, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. Well, he had cast all of them out. Yet it seems like it's fairly common knowledge that there's a woman here that does this. Okay? Have any of you looked into or heard how this ceremony was supposedly performed at all?
Something into a fire or something?
There were places in the earth that, like deep caverns or deep holes. You've heard of like bottomless pits, that the ancients used to believe were the gateways to the dead, gateways to Hades, in the unseen realm. Okay, and so when someone would find one of those, they would take advantage of that discovery, and they would, use what they believe was magic or whatever to call up the spirits from the dead. In fact, if you look over at Matthew chapter 16, I heard a lesson on this probably about 12 years ago. In verse 13, it says, when Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Okay, and this, of course, is where Peter makes his great confession. And the point of the sermon was, he has traveled all the way to Caesarea Philippi, which is north, okay, of where he is. It's northern Galilee. And what exists there was a huge cavern, a huge cave, right, that the ancients worship as being the gate to Hades, right, the realm of the dead. And there are all kinds of shrines and idols and everything there. And people went up there and they worshiped and they tried to commune with the dead and everything. And the gist of the sermon was Jesus is making a point by asking his disciples right there, who do people say that I am? And him talking about the idea that this is nothing and I am the Christ. You know, flesh and blood is not delivered. Reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I say, you're Peter, and upon this rock I'm going to build my church, not this business. Whether or not that's the reason he went up there, who knows, right? But they made a big point about at Caesarea Philippi, there was this cavern that nobody could really kind of find the end to. And they worshiped there because they thought it was a connection to the underworld. So the witch at Endor, most likely, is in an area that has a huge pit. And what they would do is they would take bones and they would take animal sacrifices and sometimes human sacrifices, and they would throw them into that pit, and then they would do their incantations or whatever in order to bring a spirit up that could communicate with whoever wanted to communicate with them. Okay? And it is very, 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 very likely that this never happened. Okay? Rather, they took advantage of people wanting desperately to commune with a long-lost relative or loved one. And so this is where Saul is going. Okay? He had banished all the mediums, but now he breaks his own law as well as the law of God. Take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 18. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 through 11, God has said, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or is a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. So this was a law of God, okay? And so here's Saul, and you can tell what extreme he's been pushed to, okay? He's a wreck by this time in his kingdom. He's looking for guidance, he's looking for reassurance, and he feels like he has no other recourse. Now think about that for a second. If God's not going to hear you, if God's not going to respond to you in any way, what recourse do you have? Why, the world over, why is the occult still to this day such a popular moving force?
People are desperate to hear something.
What?
People are desperate to hear something.
And they're desperate to hear something because they won't listen to God. You reject God, you're a spiritual being. There's no way you can get around that, right? Even people who say that there is no God can't deny that they're a spiritual being. People for millennia have been worshiping rocks. Don't want to worship God, but I'll take a giant boulder and I'll cover it with gold and I'll sit down there and I'll worship it, right? Or like, the writers there in Psalms talk about, I'll take a tree, I'll chop it in half, half of it I'll turn into my God, the other half I'll cook my food with, okay? They have eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. They have mouths, but they do not speak. They have feet, but they do not move. You know, on and on and on. Okay? The occult is resorted to by people who can't deny the Spirit, but don't want to acknowledge God. They're looking for some kind of answer. They're looking for some kind of handhold. Okay? They believe there's something more to this life than just the present experience of it. So why did God reject the occult? Why did he tell his people, banish all these people? You will not suffer them to live. Put them out of existence. Because what?
There's no God like Jehovah.
Yeah, there's no God like Jehovah. The occult circumvents God. I'm going to ignore God, and I'm going to go a different route. And so, what are the reasons? Might God have cast his people out?
A lot of people in the occult think that their leader is God.
Mm-hmm. They worship him as a spokesman for God, or what have you. People who practice the occult, do they take advantage of people? Yeah, they take advantage of gullible people. You know, it's so much trickery, right? And it's so much foolishness, and it's so much fakery that's going on, and they take advantage of other people.
Well, beyond that, if you go to the Ten Commandments, even, you know, it says, "Do not make idols for yourself, whether you're shaped of anything in heaven above, or the earth below, or the water under the earth. You must not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." So why he say give up the occult out? Because he's a jealous God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like God doesn't like to be circumvented, right? Okay. I want you to take a look at some passages about references to the occult in Israel. In Leviticus chapter 20, Leviticus chapter 20 at verse 27. Leviticus 20:27 says, "A man or a woman who is a medium or who has familiar spirits shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood shall be upon them." In Deuteronomy 26. In Deuteronomy 26 and verse 24. Well, there is no 26:24, so obviously that's a typo. I wonder if it's 24:26. Sometimes I'll do that. Nope, not 24:26. Maybe it's chapter 2:46. Let's go to Psalms 106:28. I hate it when I do that. I'll type it down there, I type it wrong. 106:28, Psalms 106:28. Says, "They joined themselves also to Baal of Peor and ate sacrifices made to the dead." And this was a very common practice in the occult. Of course, sacrifices made to the dead could refer to the dead idols themselves. Okay? And so God has told Israel that they're not supposed to be involved in any of this, yet Saul, you know, that's exactly where he flees to. Now, what's interesting here is listen to Saul's language. In verse 8, Saul disguised himself and put on other clothes. And he went, and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, "Please conduct a seance for me and bring up for me the one whom I shall name to you." Why is he disguising himself?
If she knew that it's all she would have admitted that she was me.
Okay, all right. One, he doesn't want to scare her or drive her away because, I mean, he's Saul. And 2, he probably doesn't want anybody knowing that he's breaking the law. He's going to this person. So then the woman said to him, "Look, you know what Saul has done. Now he has cut off the mediums and the spiritists from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for my life to cause me to die?" And Saul swore to her by the Lord. It's just like when the one tribe of Judah betrayed, I think Monty pointed this out, the one tribe of Judah betrayed David into his hands, and he says, oh, blessed are you of the Lord, right? When he is violating the Lord all the time. So he swears to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, who shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. How come? Probably scared the pants off of her, right? It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I can't pull the wool over this guy's eyes because it's really happening, okay? So she sees this spirit come up, most likely from the pit, and the woman spoke to Saul, saying, why have you deceived me, for you are Saul? You know, she makes the connection real quick, right? She's got to be terrified now. And the king said to her, do not be afraid. What did you see? And the woman said, so I saw a spirit ascending up out of the earth. So he said to her, what is his form? She said, an old man is coming up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed down. Okay? Chances are very good she's never seen this happen before. You know, she's been pulling the wool over people's eyes for who knows how long. But when it actually happens, she cries out. She's shocked. She's startled. She's probably terrified. Okay? She realizes, you wanted Samuel. You must be Saul. This is coming up. She said, you know, I'm doomed. And Saul said, forget that. Who is it? What was the form you saw? And so when he realizes it's Samuel, he bows down to the ground. You know what's interesting is I have run into Christians over the years that believe in ghosts. I mean, they believe in ghosts. They believe in spirits that wander through the earth and what have you. You know, you got people and they will just on a stack of Bibles swear that they have actually seen or witnessed a ghost. How do you deal with that? You don't. You say, yeah, all right. I don't think so, but.
I mean, the thing is, you're not there. You don't know what they think.
Yeah.
And while it defies all logic, you're going against something that you can listen and say, well, I don't think the scripture support that.
Right.
And things like that, but you're dealing with personal experience that you weren't there.
Yeah.
And you have no way to explain what it is that does all.
Yeah, and you have no idea what their psychological state was, you know, when they believed that they saw the spirit or experienced paranormal, what have you. I remember when I first became a Christian, I was sitting in the high school class, because my buddy who taught me was in high school still, right? So I'm sitting there, and they got into a big old debate about paranormal activities. They got into a big old debate about telekinesis, you know, people bending spoons with their mind. Wasn't there a guy named Uri Geller a long time ago that supposedly could move objects with his mind and all his business? And they were just going round and round about some people saying, yes, it's real, some people saying, no, it's not. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to both of them. I'm a brand new Christian, right? I'm sitting there thinking, who cares? You know, it's like, who cares? If this guy has the ability to bend a spoon just by thinking about it, does that make him any less accountable to God? Nope. Right? If a guy walked in here and he could actually levitate and walk down this aisle 3 feet off the ground, does that make him any less responsible to God? It'd blow your mind, right? But would it destroy your faith in God?
I guess I have a question about the whole chapter. I'm still confused. Going back to this medium, I'm not sure that she couldn't have done it. Like you're saying, she just always pulled the wool over people's eyes.
Yeah.
If there was no power in these people, then why would God condemn them to begin with and say, don't be around them?
Okay, one reason is because they would be taking advantage of people. They'd be misleading people. They'd be misleading people in a very serious spiritual way, and they would be misleading people to the point in drawing them away from God. People would I can find my answers with this fortune teller, or I can find my answer with this soothsayer or this spiritist, right? And
We
so,
know that there were spirits.
what?
We do know that back in the Old Testament times, there were spirits, and there were like demons. I mean,
Mhm.
things, supernatural things that we don't deal with now.
Right.
And how was she able to do this? I mean, this is just all.
Yeah, I don't know that she was able to do it. I don't know if she was just
I mean,
fraud.
how did Samuel get there?
What?
How did Samuel's spirit get there?
I look at this and I just say God allowed Samuel to appear to Saul and give him a message, just like he can send angels to people, right? In fact, he has sent an angel to torment Saul, right? And this is what's causing Saul to fly out the handle all the time, want to kill David, okay? An evil spirit. Not an evil spirit in the sense of anti-God, but evil then he's not bringing good things, right? And so, God can do this. And I've always personally understood this passage as, okay, this woman's shocked. I don't think it's ever happened to her. God allowed this because he's going to send Saul a message. It's not going to be a very good message, right? It's not going to be a happy omen, okay? In fact, what's Samuel's reaction?
Bring me up here for
Yeah, it's like he says to Saul in verse 15, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? It's like, wait a minute here. See, I've always wondered about that. How long was Lazarus dead? 4 days. Okay? His own sister says, by now he stinks. And Jesus brings him back. How do you suppose Lazarus felt about that? I don't know if I'd be too thrilled with that. But, Jesus.
Lazarus would be happy to see Jesus more so than Samuel.
Yeah.
Samuel's like, finally, God, dude, thank you, darkness, and then I see what I'm like.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you again. This is, what are you doing by bringing me up and disturbing me? So, it's like, once I'm gone, I don't think I'm going to have any desire to want to come back. Right? Missy, do you have your hand up?
Well, just as I read this, I ponder her fear, because the fear seems to be directed in the fact that she figured out that Saul.
Yeah.
Not that Samuel's there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's afraid of the fact that it's Saul, and she recognizes Saul, but when she sees the Spirit, doesn't it say that she cries out?
Yeah, that's why whenever I read, she cried out with a loud voice, and the woman said to Saul, why did you see me? That's what she's crying out.
Yeah. I got the impression that she was crying out because she sees Samuel.
When the woman saw Samuel, she screamed.
Yeah.
And then she asked Saul, why did you see me?
Right. Because she puts two and two together.
Yeah.
She realizes this has got to be Saul. All right. We talk about this all night long and not gain anything really out of it. It's just one of those curious passages in the Bible that's kind of fun to think about a little bit. But I think the idea about the occult is very important for us to look at and consider, because it's still very strong in this world today. It's strong in every country. You have people that, they reject God. They want to get into the occult. And it's like, no, I'm not going to listen to what God has to say. I'm going to listen to what my ancestors have to say. And there are many religions in the world today that are based around ancestral worship, right? My ancestors are going to guide me.
I don't think everybody within an occult has rejected God. They're just looking for something physical
Possibly.
that they can
Yeah.
connect with.
Yeah, it's a pretty blanket statement to say everybody interested in the occult rejects God. So, yeah, you're right. Okay. In verse 19, what's the message that, well, actually, before we get there, in verse 16, Saul's asking, what should I do? In verse 16, Samuel says, why then do you ask me, seeing the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy? And the Lord has done for himself as he spoke by me. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor, namely David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. What's he saying in verse 19? You and your sons are, you're going to die, right? And I don't imagine Saul's feeling too good about that, right? And so, towards the end of the chapter, what does the witch and his servants try to get Saul to do? Eat a meal. Is this his last meal? Right. Tomorrow, you and your sons are going to be with me. And they persuade him to eat. She had a fatted calf in the house. She kills it, makes some bread, brought before Saul. He and his servants ate, and then they rose and went away that night. So what he's looking for, he doesn't find. And when we look at the position of these two chapters in relation to one another, the story of Saul interrupts the predicament David is in. What's David's predicament?
About to fight his own people.
What?
He was about to fight his own people.
Yeah, he's about to fight his own people. For the last 16 months, he's been living in Philistia, telling them that he's all for them and on their side. And now they want to enlist him to fight his own people. Then the story of David's predicament interrupts the downfall of Saul. And so, is David acting like a scoundrel here? I kind of get that impression, but who knows? And has put himself into a compromising situation, definitely, a predicament, right? Saul, of course, is seeking the occult. Saul is acting in the night, and he's trying to hide this and deceive others about him seeking the occult. I've got a couple of references here in 1 Chronicles chapter 10. In 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verses 13 and 14, it says, So Saul died for his unfaithfulness, which he had committed against the Lord, because he did not keep the word of the Lord, and also because he consulted a medium for guidance. But he did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore he killed him and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse. He didn't inquire of the Lord. He sought the medium. This may not be in reference to the fact of God not responding to him, but there were different times in his life that he didn't inquire of the Lord. We take a look at Isaiah 8, verses 19 through 22. Isaiah chapter 8, beginning at verse 19. Isaiah says, When they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards who whisper and mutter, should not a people seek their God? Should they seek the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Okay? So, again, you have a passage here which talks about the circumvention of God. Right? Shouldn't they be coming to God? Why do they speak to the dead on behalf of the living? So Saul is actually acting in the night. He goes to her by night, and it's at night when they do this. 1 Thessalonians 5 through 8 talk about we are children of the day, we are children of the light. Let us cast off the works of darkness. Right? So next week we'll finish up the book. We are going to start in chapter 29, okay? Make a note. Hold me to it.
Good evening. It's time to get started, or actually, it's time to close. So, if you want to turn your songbooks, number 454, we're going to sing "Blessed Assurance." Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of His Spirit, washed in His blood. This is my story. Praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. This is my song. Praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, perfect delight. Visions of rapture now burst on my sight. Angels descending bring from above echoes of mercy, whispers of love. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior am happy and blessed. Watching and waiting, looking above, filled with His goodness, lost in His love. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long.
Good evening. Good to see everybody here that was able to make it out. We have a number of people who have not made it out tonight because of COVID and COVID-related issues. And Katie is staying home because she's been exposed. Of course, we got Steve and Wes that both have COVID and they're recovering. So that explains why most of the Roberts families are not here. So, but glad that you were able to be here. The Morrises are staying home because of their concern about COVID, and that's fine. Everybody needs to understand that if you're concerned about COVID and you need to stay home, then you need to stay home, and that's okay. And so I'm just making sure everybody understands that we understand that. So, and that's really all the announcements that I have. Short announcements. I like short announcements. That's just the only time I really like doing announcements, when it's short. But anyway, certainly glad that you're here. Look forward to the next opportunity that we have to get together, which will be Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, and hope to see you all then at that time. Are there any other announcements that need to be made? If not, Jackson doing our closing prayer.
Pray with me, please. Dear God, thank you for allowing us to be able to come out here safely. Thank you for giving us our minds to be able to comprehend your word that you have given to us. And thank you for giving us your son who gave us an example. Please help us to always want to strive to be more like him. Please be with everyone in the announcements to be safe. And please be with the elders as they try to lead us on the right path. Please help us to have an open mind and want to study your word. Please be with us as we go through our week. Please help us to be safe and want to be better Christians, be shining light anywhere with that we go. In your son's name that we pray. Amen.